I'm Wendy Rose Williams, and I am a past life energy healer. And I help people release pain, anxiety, depression, stuck energy. And what a difference it makes in life. We can feel so much happier, healthier, and that our life has a beautiful purpose when we're no longer stuck in the past and can be much more in the present moment. And my website is wendyrosewilliams.com. And I'd like to introduce my wonderful co-host, Gregg Kirk, and he's going to introduce, we have a very special guest with us today, and I can't wait to jump into the conversation with her.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gregg Kirk. I am an energy healer, a Lyme disease advocate, and I have a Lyme recovery clinic that I run in Connecticut. And I also do in-person and remote energy sessions via WhatsApp, Zoom, phone. I've got patients all over the world who I'm helping. Tomorrow night, I'm doing sessions with people in Japan. So that's a crazy time difference that we're working on. But yeah, so what do? I help remove blocks to your healing, to your spiritual ascension. I offer herbal help for Lyme disease. And so I also run group events in person in the Connecticut area. So click my events link to check those out. Click my appointment request link if you'd like to make an appointment with me. And I'm at greggkirk.com. That's spelled GREGGKIRK.com. So, Wendy, I'm going to pull up our deck today. And
Fantastic. So while Gregg brings up the PowerPoint, because for those of you who are listening, that's wonderful. And we appreciate you doing that. And for those of you who are watching, we also have a PowerPoint deck. And we will, and today and every podcast is always archived. So they're recorded for you. If the live time is not convenient, typically the second Monday of the month at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time, 5:30 Eastern. And if that time is not convenient for you, go to our website, which is wakingupspiritually.com. And there everything is recorded and archived for you. And you're able to search for it by topic. So Gregg, why don't you introduce today's wonderful speaker?
I will. Julie Ryan is a psychic medium and medical intuitive who can sense what medical conditions and illnesses a person has and can facilitate energetic healing. She can also communicate with spirits, both alive and dead. She is a buffet of psychicness, which she has trademarked that phrase. She can scan animals, access people's lives, and she can tell how close to death someone is. She's written books called The Angelic Attendants, What Really Happens as We Transition from This Life to the Next, which describes a series of events that involves angels, multitudes of deceased family and friends, spirits of deceased pets, and countless serendipitous and miraculous moments. Her angel messages books are picture books that have angels answering kids' tough questions. Each week, Julie scans callers on her Ask Julie Ryan show, which is heard in more than 100 countries throughout the world. And Julie is a businesswoman, an inventor, an author, a podcaster, a serial entrepreneur. Her surgical device inventions are sold globally, and she has founded 9 companies in 5 different industries. So,
That is so rare.
when does she sleep? Is my question.
Right. She's just a delightful person. So let's bring her on.
Here she is.
Well, hi there, Julie. Welcome to Waking Up Spiritually. We're just so thrilled to have you here and just really excited to jump into angelic attendance because I think so many people fear death, fear that they don't know what's going to happen, fear being in pain or just not loved and supported through the process, or they're in fear regarding a loved one that's actively dying and passing on. So can you just kind of give us some of the background? Like, where did you get this marvelous information that's in angelic attendance? Was it via meditations or did it come to you over a long time period? Can you just kind of set the stage for us?
Sure. I got it from my mom when she was dying in 2002. And I learned how to be a medical intuitive and psychic medium. And so when she was dying, I had been studying it probably about, I don't know, 10 years or so, and not really doing anything with it professionally, but just it was something I was interested in. And we got a call that my mother had been moved from the hospital into hospice. And that was a surprise to all of us. We didn't anticipate that. And so we drove through the night, an 8 or 9 hour drive, my husband and our son, who was 10 at the time, and we got to she was in a inpatient hospice facility and maybe 20 beds or so. And we got there and she kind of nodded. She knew we were there, but she wasn't really communicating much. And the nurses told the family that they thought she'd be there for a couple of weeks because she was coming in well hydrated from the hospital. She'd been on some IVs. And so we said, okay. So we settled in. And then what happened was over the next few hours, I was seeing angels arrive and spirits of deceased loved ones and the spirits of deceased pets that we'd had when I was a kid and my siblings were kids. And I'm thinking, what is this?
Very
And
active.
yes, very busy. And found out later that most people see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as they're approaching death. Actually, university-based research shows that 90+% of people see their loved ones' spirits either in dreams or visions as they're ending, their lives are coming to an end. So we went out for dinner. We came back. Again, the nurses said, you guys can all go home and get some sleep. She's not going to last very long. And I had seen a progression from the spiritual side of the equation that I can get into in more detail if you'd like. And I said to my family, I'm just going to spend the night here. And the nurses were saying, oh, you don't really need to. I'm like, yeah, I think I'm just going to stay. And she died at 5 the next morning. And it was based on the things that I was able to observe that gave me kind of an inside scoop on what was happening. So it was really an interesting phenomenon because on one side, my heart was breaking because my mother was dying. And on the other side, I'm watching this gloriousness unfold from the spirit side. I found it to be really comforting. And then when we had her funeral, a few days later, I was raised Roman Catholic and go to church most Sundays. Now I call myself a cafeteria Catholic. I take what I like and I leave the stuff that I don't like. And so
Nice woman.
yeah, there's a prayer at the end of every Catholic funeral that's called In Paradisum. And in Latin, it's into paradise, translates into paradise. And it talks about how how your loved ones and the angels will greet you and lead you into paradise. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's what I saw happen with my mother. And so she was the first one that I witnessed all this in. Certainly, I've done it thousands of times since. And the interesting part, you guys, is she was a school principal. So she was an educator her whole life. And so she educated me on what was going on. And I, in turn, am educating the world on what happens when somebody's dying.
Can I ask just a mechanical question about this? Were you
Sure.
meditating when you saw these angelic presences, or did you just actually see and sense them in the room? How did you know?
Great question. I I call it my radar. I turn it on and off in a nanosecond. And that's what I teach my students to do. It's not necessary. It's been my experience, let me put it that way, that it's not necessary to meditate for an hour first and twirl 3 times and jump on your left foot and raise your right hand in order to get in touch with spirit. You just, boom, you turn it on and off.
Right.
So, no, I was present. I was there in the room. I turned my radar on. I could see them. I could feel them. I could sense them. I could hear them. I could smell things even. So,
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. What I meant by meditating was just closing your eyes, and I guess it's kind of like what you're saying. It's turning your radar on because
Tuning in.
Yeah.
your description of your mother passing is so identical to the account I read in your book to what I experienced with my mother-in-law passing.
Oh,
So
great.
so
Yeah.
yeah, and I wasn't meditating. I was in the the room in the hospital room, and I just closed my eyes and I started to see things. You saw way more detail than I saw, but
Yeah.
it had some similarities, and I had the exact same emotional experience that you described, which was your heart's breaking on the one hand, and then you're seeing this gloriousness, like you said. It's
Yeah.
they're going to this amazing place, so there's no reason to grieve. Somebody said to me prior, as the relatives are coming in, you know how dire and dour this situation is. Everybody's sad and fearful and upset. And a friend of mine said, "But Gregg, you can make it beautiful." So that's what I felt that was my goal, to try to keep everybody's spirits up. Not,
Mhm.
allowing everyone to grieve, but to try to help them understand that the pain was going away. They're moving on to a better place, than we are here. So, it's okay. This is a natural process. It's a birthing process. Yeah, just like the spirit comes into the 3D world, but this is the birthing of back to the energetic world. So, anyway, your description reminded me so much of what I experienced, and my question was, more or less how you experienced it. So, were you closing your eyes, or are you doing something else?
Both. Usually I'll close my eyes maybe for a second or two, just kind of to focus. And then I can see things with my eyes open, with my human eyes open.
Right,
And then I can see the spirit world too. But, and I've been doing this for 30 years.
right.
And I've done this thousands of times. I've done medical healings tens of thousands of times.
Wow.
So it's just second nature for me. And when I'm teaching people how to do it, it's an instant connection. You want to hook on instantly. The fun thing about to your point about being afraid or people being uncomfortable, I think in our Western societies, we've gotten so far away from being together as a family when a loved one is dying. And certainly since the beginning of time, families and cultures have been together. And it really wasn't anything to be afraid of. But nowadays it is. People are fearful. And there's a lot of information out there about what happens in the afterlife, about near death experiences, about grieving and how to process grief, but not so much about what happens as we're dying. And not only is it scary for us because we don't know what our loved one is experiencing, but it also makes us face our own mortality
Mhm.
because we think, oh, we're going to be there one day. And then, nobody gets out of that.
Right.
And may I share the story about how this all came about for me to share this information?
Absolutely.
Please.
One day I was with my mentor, and this was probably 10 years ago or so, and she was doing a healing on me, and I was laying on a massage table face up, and I had a blanket on and a pillow. I was all snuggly. And when she does a healing on me, her name's Susan, my deceased loved ones are on either side of the table. Their spirits are in the room. And so they're participating in the healing. Even my late dog, Katie, she's on her hind legs and her little paws are up on the
No.
side of the table. It's a riot. And so one day this spirit of this pope showed up, this dead pope showed up in the room with his hat on and his vestments and the whole 9 yards. And I said, well, who are you? And Susan could see him too. And he said, well, I'm Clement. And I said, okay, I never heard of a Pope Clement. And he said, I was number 6. I said, great. Kind of, why are you here? I said, well, how may I help you? I was kind and polite. And he said, well, you're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies. And I said, I'm not doing that. I'm a businesswoman. People will think I'm nuts. And he said, yeah, 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 yeah. Just get on with it. He said, everything you've done in your life has prepared you for this. And you know what happens. And it's been so bastardized over the millennia, and people are afraid. There's nothing to be afraid about.
Right.
So just kind of like the Nike ad, just do it. So I went out to my car when I was leaving you guys, and I looked it up on my phone. I looked him up on my phone just in an internet search. This guy was in office during the Black Plague when two-thirds of Europe died, and he's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. And I thought, I can't make that up.
No,
I never heard of this guy, and he shows up and wants me to do this book and teach the world what happens. So that's what I've been doing.
that's amazing.
Just the validation of it. It's just perfect. And just the patience of those on the other side waiting for us to step to the plate.
Exactly.
Right.
But the other funny thing is, whenever he shows up, he's always got his hat on, his Pope hat. And so after a few years, I said, Clement, I know who you are. You don't have to wear that hat. And he laughed and he said, yeah, but it looks good though, don't you think?
And
So
that's just so spirit too, just that sense of humor and just, the playfulness that you wouldn't expect from a pope.
oh, they're hilarious.
Mhm.
Yeah. I didn't expect that either when I first started talking with Spirit.
Exactly. And Julie, could you walk us through, for our listening audience, of what you see and sense and what actually occurs of who comes forward with for people as they are passing on, as they're dying?
Sure, sure. I've coined this into the 12 phases of transition. So, phase one is the spirit exits through the top of the head, and it looks like a bubble in a speech bubble in a cartoon. And then the first spirit to come in is the maternal spirit, closest to the person who's dying. So, for instance, my mother's deceased. So, it would be my mother in my case if I was dying. If she was still alive, it would be her mother, my maternal grandmother. If she was still alive, it would be my maternal great grandmother. It's always on the maternal line. Then the next spirit to come in is the paternal spirit. So it would be my dad. My dad is deceased. His spirit would come in. If he was still alive, it would be my maternal grandfather. So it reverts back to the maternal line, my maternal great grandfather. It's really interesting how it's all on the maternal side. And we think as mothers, when Wendy, I'm sure you'll have an opinion about this. We think, oh, when our kids are grown, we're kind of done mothering them. Well, we're still mothering them from the grave. We're coming in to help them transition.
Right.
So that's what happens next. And then the angels show up. And these are big old angels. I'm a Catholic schoolgirl, so they look like the statues in the paintings. Big wings, white gown, long hair, bare feet, rope belt, all of that. It's important to remember that that's how I perceive them because that's how spirit works. It's going to show up in a way that we can understand who it is.
What's related
Whereas,
for us. Hmm.
exactly, something that's familiar. So perhaps somebody that's raised in an indigenous culture may see angel energy as just a ball of purple energy, whereas I see it as the statuary. So that happens. It was interesting to me that the maternal spirit's the one that runs the show from the spirit world. I thought God maybe had like an air traffic control division and would dispatch angels to somebody when they needed to come back to heaven, but that's not how I perceive it. So then other deceased loved ones' spirits show up through the 12 phases. The circle of angels that's anchored by the parental spirits that begins to open into a horseshoe and then later a straight line. Let's say if somebody's in the bed, across the foot of the bed. And pet spirits show up. Every pet that you've ever had in your life will be there. Even pets. I've seen pets that are neighbors' pets, and that's interesting. When I'll say, okay, there's a German Shepherd there. They'll say, was that your grandmother's dog? No, it was her next door neighbor's dog, but he was at their house all the time.
Oh, that's really
Which
cute.
is sweet. Farm animals
Mm.
show up, which is fun. I'll say, did your grandmother live on a farm or does she now? And they'll say, yeah. And I'll describe the animals, cows and horses and sheep and ducks and chicks and the whole nine yards, which is really sweet. And
That's just
then
amazing. Mhm.
yeah. And then about phase six, there are two additional angels that show up and they're positioned on either side of the spirit bubble. And when that happened with my mom, I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. I'm not sure what they're going to do, but I know they'll play a part, certainly. And again, my heart's breaking and I'm anticipating what's coming next, from the spirit side of the equation. And I'm sharing this with my family in the room, and they're not able to perceive it, but they're listening to me. I think my brothers probably thought I was like, yeah, whatever. But now they know better because I'm very accurate. They usually will call me if they've got a health thing going on, and my older brother, whose character will say, "Do your thing." So I'll do that. And then a couple of other nuances that are really interesting. The first one is about phase 9, those angels on either side of the spirit bubble, their wings begin to move. And again, I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. I wonder what's going to happen. And they reminded me of this giant owl. Have you ever seen a giant owl documentary? Big wings, they're silent, they're smooth, they're rhythmic. You can almost feel the drag as they fly through the air. And what I noticed with my mother was these angels' wings on either side of her spirit bubble, as I call it, created a vortex that I could see, I could feel, felt like when you're at the end of the car wash and they turn on the dryer and it's sucking all the water off your car. I mean, this was a big sucking
An updraft.
situation with this updraft. Yes. And I could hear it and I could see it. And I thought, okay, I have no clue what's going to happen, but I know this is going to be an integral part. And in fact, the spirit exits through the body. You'll hear a lot of people say, especially near death experience people, they'll say, it was like I was going through a tunnel. Well, that's the tunnel, it's the vortex. And then those angels, once the spirit is out of the vortex, then they escort the the spirit to heaven. A couple of interesting points about that. When I was writing my book, Angelic Attendants, happen to have one here. What really happens as we transition from this life into the next is the subtitle. When I was writing the book, I was led to do an internet search on wings owl vortex. Well, come to find out, there's this thing called the wingtip vortex that is an aeronautical engineering phenomenon. If you do an internet search on that, you will find thousands of articles and aeronautical engineering drawings and stories and whatever research. It's what causes a plane or a bird or a bug or anything that flies, a jet, to lift. So wingtip vortex, it's these vortices that form underneath the wings and it causes lift. And I thought, holy schmoly, my mother has these angels creating that created these vortices that helped her lift out of her body, that I could see, hear, feel from the spirit world affecting her in the physical world. I thought that was remarkable.
That
And then
is remarkable.
and the other thing that I thought was really fascinating was that in Paradisum prayer that I mentioned earlier. I did some research and learned that it began as a 5th century Gregorian chant. So perhaps people have been able to see this phenomenon since the beginning of time, but maybe it took until the 5th century till somebody was well educated enough that they could read and write. And certainly some of the most learned people were men living in monasteries and synagogues by the 5th century. So I found that remarkable as well.
That just lends credence to everything just so beautifully. It just feels so meant to be. Now, I have a question. I realize everything is perfect at the soul level and at the higher self level, but when we're down here in the game, sometimes people are estranged from a parent or don't get along with a parent, or the parent is perhaps mentally ill or not capable or doesn't believe in what we're describing. So is there ever something different that's done? I'm just curious if you have any experience or any thoughts on that. If, angels come in and take the role, or as you said, like it might be the grandmother or the great grandmother instead, the most appropriate, best fit just steps up to be starting the show of getting the person off stage.
It's all I can talk about is my experience thousands of times in helping families. And you bring up a really good point, Wendy, and that is that time, most of us have heard time doesn't exist in the spirit world, time's a human creation.
Right.
And so the 12 phases, it's been my experience again, because I can do an instant replay of somebody's death. Everybody goes through the 12 phases, whether they die instantly, like in the case of a homicide or suicide, or whether they die over a very prolonged period of days, weeks, months, even years. Everybody goes through the 12 phases of transition. The other part of your question about what happens if somebody is estranged from a family member, all spirits are pure love. And the snarkiness of somebody's personality will stay with the body when they die. I liken it to a role in a movie that an actor is playing, and everybody goes to heaven. There was a movie out, I think in the 80s, called All Dogs Go to Heaven. All people go to heaven too. I have many stories about families saying, "Oh, Grandpa is worried that he's going to go to hell." Hell doesn't exist. It's been used to control the masses throughout the ages with
He might
fear.
give himself a short timeout
Right.
if it's his belief system, but
That's right.
that can be rectified when he stands up for himself and says, I need help. I deserve better. This is not right. And just asks for that. And then the uplift comes. It's like the NDEs that start in what appears to be hell or purgatory.
Well, and I think in those instances, we perceive things we don't understand through a lens of fear. And most of us in this culture have seen or read or heard scary stories or spooky stories about evil spirits and all that jazz. And that's all been propagated by people trying to control us with fear over the millennia, cultures, religions,
Right,
civilizations, those kinds of things.
right.
Julie, what about patients who are in a coma or they have dementia or ALS or Alzheimer's? So they haven't passed on. Do you see that they've begun the transition stages? Or what, what's your take on those situations? What do you see?
Well, everybody obviously has their own personal experience. So, somebody that's been in a coma for a day may be at phase 7, and somebody else who's been in a coma for a day may be at phase 2 or phase 9 or
Mhm.
whatever. There are three questions I always ask, and my graduates ask, and those are somebody when they're dying. That is number one, are you ready to go? And it's a yes or no answer. Are you in pain? Because we want to be able to manage their pain. And then the third thing is, what do you need? And that just ranges the gamut. I mean, it's like, can be bring me a chocolate bar to, uh, I need to talk to my sister who's in a different country, kind of a thing. And it's just all across the board. One of my favorite stories, since you brought it up, Gregg, about an Alzheimer's patient, it was of an elderly woman who had Alzheimer's and hadn't spoken in about 7 years. And her family had contacted me. And so we were having a conference call between grandma's spirit, because once you talk to spirits, once you connect with them, doesn't matter if they're attached to a body or not, it's still spirits. You just connect to that spirit. So we're talking to grandma's spirit, and it's kind of a conference call between the family and grandma and me. And so, grandma, are you ready to go? Yes. Are you in pain? No. What do you need? I need them to go get my missal, my red missal, which was a prayer book. It's an old fashioned word for a prayer book. And I want them to sing. And so sing songs out of my prayer book, basically out of my missal. Go get my missal and sing songs out of it. So the family had no idea what a missal was. I said, well, it's a prayer book. It's like a red prayer book. They had no clue where it was. Grandma told us it's in her nightstand on the left side of her bed or whatever. So somebody goes to the house, they get grandma's prayer book, they come back and they sang Amazing Grace.
Mhm.
Grandma, now this grandma hadn't spoken in 7 years. She sang the song with them, spoke all of the words, and then died shortly thereafter.
That's incredible.
So, how wonderful that we have the ability to communicate with this person who had not been able verbally or cognitively to be able to communicate in years. And that's their last memory of her. And that's what she needed in order to go on to heaven. I mean, how sweet is that?
Wow.
Beautiful,
That,
beautiful gift that you can be that interpreter and that people I've heard and read that multiple times that there often is this last terminal lucidity, I believe is the term of when, thank you, whichever angel just said that, because I didn't
Yeah.
remember her. And just like this last burst of whether it's lucidity or energy or seeming to wake up, and it's just to give that last moment together,
Mhm.
to be a good one like that, and it can be very surprising, I think, for the loved ones.
The hospice workers call that the rally.
Mhm. Rally, that's a perfect term too. Yes.
but
Yeah.
talk about making the passing beautiful. That's such a great example.
Mhm.
Well, and sound apparently is the last thing to go. I've heard that from lots of hospice workers, and they say your loved one can hear you,
Mhm.
whether you're talking to them telepathically or verbally. They can hear you because sound is the last thing they're hearing, is the last thing to shut down,
Right.
which
That
is good for us to know.
it is, and just because of energy, I think of being made of sound harmonics in a lot of ways. And with Gregg being a musician, it just that just makes so, so much sense to me.
So what's the most surprising thing you've learned through your work, Julie?
That everybody goes to heaven.
Okay.
I mean, I was raised not in the fire and brimstone, but certainly the Catholics were, we had limbo for unbaptized babies. And that just kind of faded off into into the ethers. Nobody really talks about limbo anymore. And then we had purgatory, where you just go burn for a while, to suffer, and then you get purified, and then you can go to heaven. Well, that's kind of gone away too, gone by the wayside. And really, they don't talk about hell very much anymore either. I think, I don't know if it was Pope Francis, perhaps, or maybe Pope John Paul said, yeah, hell's like a figure of your mind. It's not a real place,
Mhm.
kind of a thing. But old traditions die hard. And there are a lot of people that still believe in eternal suffering and all of that. So that was a switch, when Spirit said, yeah, yeah, yeah. And Pope Clement's going, yeah, everybody goes to heaven. It's glorious. They don't need to worry about it. There's nothing to be afraid of. And I've heard that bazillions of times from all kinds of spirits. So that's been interesting. The other thing is how comforting this knowledge is, to know that we're surrounded by spirits of deceased loved ones and pets and angels for our family members and our loved ones at the end of their lives, gives us a sense of closure and a sense of peace. But also for me personally, because I think now at this stage, I'm in my mid 60s, and I think, okay, worst thing that can happen is I die and I'm escorted to heaven by angels. Okay. And my loved ones are going to be there. That's the worst thing that can happen to me. It makes me not hold myself back from trying new things. Instead of coming from a place of fear, I address it from a place of adventure. And being escorted to heaven by angels is pretty wonderful. Actually, I was going to call my book Angelic Escorts. And my son said, Mom, if you do that and somebody does an internet search, they're going to come up with every call girl service on the internet, and
Right.
you're going to be blocked. You got to come up with another name. I said, yeah, good point.
It's what my grandmother said. Certain words have been ruined. She really mourned that the meaning had changed for um, the word gay. To her, it meant happy and carefree and lighthearted. I mean, she was born in the early 1900s, and she's like, with all respect, I understand it means something different now, but I liked what it meant before.
Yeah. And I know women that have that as their first name.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was pretty popular. during
Yes,
that time.
yes,
It's even,
joy or gay. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
it's even in the Flintstones theme song, which that was in the late 50s, early
It
60s.
is. Where is
We'll,
it?
we'll, we'll have a gay old time. That's the final
Oh, you're
line.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
And so word usage can change. They say teenage girls are the language disruptors and change
Oh,
the meaning of words the most of anyone. Um, But I just want to share a quick story, Julie, that I think is similar to what you're describing so beautifully. So I was with a relative and she was having a major surgery, and she'd asked me to be there in the hospital with her because she was having joint replacement and had not had a major surgery like that before. And I was told before I went to the hospital, this is one of her potential exit points.
mm,
So it's really important that you're there to just be in support, have no agenda and just love, love, love and help keep her comfortable. And what happened was the day after when she woke up the next morning after successful, I think it was a hip replacement, and I had put some flowers up, like high on the wall. There was a little shelf up high to be out of the way. And she looked at them and she saw them and she said, "Oh, thank you for bringing me flowers. That's really nice. Now can you get rid of all those people in the corner
yeah.
because they're scaring me and I don't like them there." And I said, "Who do you see? Who do you feel?" She said, "Well, my parents are there and there's some angels, and I'm not going anywhere yet. So they're welcome to look at the flowers, and then you tell them to hit the road."
I love that. Oh, what a great story.
Okay. Planned exit point, not this one.
Exactly.
But it was interesting. She could, and
Yeah.
this is not an individual who normally would have been open, but she was describing very accurately, and it was at the foot of her bed. And let's see, it would have been to her left where those flowers were and where she was perceiving the people coming in.
Yeah. Well, and there's a chapter in Angelic Attendants to my book about what happens in the operating room since you bring up surgery and
Yeah.
hospitals. And there's a configuration of spirits that are in the room. It's been my experience that the patient's guardian angel is always over the head of anesthesia, and there are surgeon spirits over the head of the actual surgeon or surgeons performing the procedure. And then loved ones' spirits are in kind of a horseshoe pattern, like an amphitheater at the foot of the operating room table. And there's definitely a correlation between how much prayer is being said for someone and how many spirits are in the room. I find that fascinating.
Oh,
And
that is fascinating. So if
it
someone
doesn't,
had a
yeah, it doesn't have to be organized prayer, it can be meditation or good thoughts or whatever, but you'll hear people say, "Yeah, I've got my mom on 5 prayer chains." And I'll say, "Yeah, I can tell that operating room is very crowded with spirits,"
Hmm.
which I find fascinating.
absolutely.
So that's other work that you do as well, not just with people passing over, but you had mentioned, I think it was with your husband, that you had noticed during his surgery that he had a host of helpers around him in your book. I mean, is that tell us about that.
Yeah, and well, and he had extra angels in the room, and we
Right.
didn't find out until he was back in the recovery room, and they wouldn't let me see him for a while. And so I finally went up and I said, "Okay, you guys, what's going on?" I mean, I was in the hospital supply business. I'm an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world and a former manufacturer of them. So I know my way around a good operating room and I know what the procedures are. And I said, "Okay, what's up? Why won't you let me back to see him?" And it had been a couple of hours since they supposedly had him in the recovery room. And then finally the doctor came out and talked to me, and he had had a complication post-op. And so that's why those extra angels were there. And that was the first time I'd seen that, but he was fine. Thank you, God. And that was a long time ago. But it's really interesting how the spirit world is so intertwined with ours and how supportive they are in our day to day lives. And especially when we ask them for help, they're not going to interfere. They're going to send little ideas into our heads and guidance. And it's up to us to be able to ferret those out from the other 70,000 thoughts we have on a daily basis. And it's been my experience too that when we ask for help, they are Johnny on the spot, whatever you need, and they're happy to oblige and help us.
Yeah. As long as it has to do with our free will. Like I usually say about the guides, they'll help you, but they won't do your homework for you. So if there's some work that you need to do, they're not going to do it for you. They'll give you some clues and they'll support you, but it's,
Yeah.
you're here to do the work.
Well, it's kind of like a treasure hunt.
Right.
Here, we're going to give you this clue, and then you got to go figure out that clue, and then you'll get another envelope when you get to that station, and then you'll get another envelope and another envelope. And people say, well, yeah, but I just want the whole thing all at once. And I say, no, you don't. That'd be like riding a roller coaster for the first time and just not having any excitement with it. After you do it once, well, it's fun the second, third, 15th time, but it's not as fun as the first time because it's the adventure.
Right.
The unknown.
Exactly.
So what's your most rewarding situation, story, interaction you've had, after all these years, Julie?
Know that I have one, Greg. I have thousands of them. And it's such a joy to get to meet people from all over the world. And if I can help in one teeny weeny little way, whether it be helping them as they have a loved one at the end of their lives by getting information or helping them navigate that heart-wrenching journey, or whether I'm scanning somebody's dog or talking with a deceased loved one, research shows that that's one of the most effective ways to heal grief is to talk with the spirit of a deceased loved one. And then certainly the majority of the work that I do is medical in nature. I'm like a human MRI. I can, with somebody's permission, I can see inside their body broken bones, torn ligaments, viral infections, bacterial infections, cancer, whatever. And then I help facilitate them healing themselves. Spirit works through me and with me to help them heal. And I have a call in show every Thursday night at 8 Eastern. It's called the Ask Julie Ryan Show. And people call in from all over the world. And we do medical stuff. We talk to deceased loved ones. We can scan Fluffy, the dog. We can do past life stuff. We can get guidance from spirit. It's just a blast. So once we connect with spirit, we can do it all. And so that's what I do and what I teach. So it's really an honor and a joy. I don't know that I have one story that stands out among the others.
Okay. Well, I mean, that sounds actually it, Wendy, do you have another question? Because I'm interested in everything that Julie does. So for like the
I
last
just
10 minutes of the show, I just like to hear about everything that she does and how people can get in touch with her and all that.
Absolutely. I just like to share a quick story. Julie and I had a shared client that we were both working with. And Julie, I was so glad that you picked, because she was very, very physically ill. And you were able to pick up on that there was an incredible case of mold
Mhm.
going, and no one had been able to pick that up. And that was
Mhm.
just such a big deal, because that was the turning point of finally having an accurate diagnosis.
Mhm.
Because how do you treat if you don't have an accurate diagnosis?
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
that was just wonderful.
Well, and most of my clients have some kind of medical something going on. Some of them are very serious, some of them aren't, but it's just some chronic symptoms. And they'll come to me normally after they've been to see multiple doctors and gotten different diagnoses in some instances and different treatment plans. And they've tried all of them and they still have the symptoms.
A lot of
And
frustration.
so,
Right.
yeah, so they're coming to me. And I always say nobody heals anybody else. If that was the case, you would have needed to go to more than one doctor. they're doing the best they can with the resources that they have. But we all heal ourselves. If you think about you've got a big cut in your leg and you go to the emergency room and you're bleeding to death, you're bleeding like crazy. Well, the doctor's going to stitch it up, but the doctor doesn't make your skin grow back. You make your own skin grow back. And that's how this works. So the work that I do on the medical side of the equation, I believe, is part of the healing process. Eastern medicine, Western medicine, all the other modalities, and the energy medicine is the part that I play. And I believe that they all work together to help the person heal themselves.
Absolutely. That makes just such perfect sense. That's one of the things that Yeshua said to me, and kind of tongue in cheek, of here's one of the secrets of what I did. And he said, I saw the person as well.
Yeah.
And just holding that space for someone, it
Right.
just and reminding the body, because that concept of us having a well cell and our divine right blueprint, or whatever terms and beliefs you have around that, I think it's just a really big deal. Because someone like we're discussing, Julie, that's just been, or Gregg, very well from the Lyme patients that you work with, and yourself having been a Lyme patient, or me with that challenging journey I took with debilitating chronic pain for decades, is, why is the person enmeshed in with this, and can they believe that it can change,
Yeah.
and then being able to hold this space for them, that this can change and this can be different and this can get better, really can be that turning point. um, so, Julie,
Well, and Lyme, excuse me one second, Lyme, Gregg, just FYI, huge percentage of the time, and then like 97, 98%, there is a mold exposure issue going on as well. And normally it's way more of an issue with the mold, and then the Lyme just exacerbates it. But if you look at a side by side comparison of mold symptoms and Lyme symptoms, they're identical.
Yes, that's what I've been finding in the past 5 years, and also intestinal parasites.
Yeah.
All three of those together make for a rough situation for a lot of people.
Right.
You know,
Julie, can you wrap up by telling us a little bit more about the children's books? Because I think, just working with that
Sure.
youngest generation is just so important. And kids just ask the best questions, and parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, we can be like,
Yeah, yeah, I have. Thanks for bringing those up, Wendy. I had to get them in my drawer here. I have four children's books, Angel Messages for Kids, Cats, Dogs, and Truth, and they're illustrated. They're beautifully illustrated with
Gorgeous.
angels, telling stories to kids and how we're all spirits attached to a body and what happens, and how children, most children have the ability to communicate with spirit up to the age of about 7 or so, 6 or 7. And it's normally when a grown up in their life has said, "Oh, honey, that's just your imagination. That's not really real." And then they learn to distrust their intuitive abilities. And this is an opportunity for them to embrace them and not have them discounted. I've had so many mothers and grandmothers, especially over the years, say, "How do I tell my grandson that yes, the information that he knows about his granddad who was dead 20 years before he was born is all accurate?" Because he talks about granddad comes and visits him and plays trains with him at night, and granddad was a train fanatic. Well, this kid doesn't know that. He's 3. And then how do I tell little Johnny that about his past lives, that he knows information about, and we can corroborate and validate the information he's talking about with historic documentation online? And then lastly, when a loved one passes and they're at the funeral home for visitation hours, And little Susie says, they're saying to little Susie, well, you know, grandma's in heaven now. And Susie says, no, she's not. She's asleep in that box at the beginning, you know, but in the front of the room. How do you explain that to them? And that's what these books are intended to do. And the grown-ups learn a lot too from reading them. They're very simple and sweet and to the point. And yeah, they're in understandable English for a toddler. So grown-ups get it too.
Awesome. Amazing work, Julie. How can people get in touch with you? What do you recommend? Because you do so many things. So please.
Okay. Well, first of all, anybody that wants a free copy of Angelic Attendance, what really happens as we transition from this life into the next, just go to julieryangift.com, julieryangift.com. And then everything else, and you can find this on my website too, the free gift, askjulieryan.com, askjulieryan.com. My show is askjulieryan.com. Wendy's been a guest.
It was a
And
wonderful conversation.
we
I
had a
so
great
loved
conversation. And so we release 4 shows a week. And we have 3 interviews, and we have the call-in show on Thursday nights at 8. And that's a blast because I never know who's calling. I never know what their questions are going to be. I never know what Spirit's going to say. So I say I feel like I'm in a crapshoot each week because it's just so much fun. So we do that. I do private sessions with clients. I have graduates that do sessions with clients that you can sign up for on my website. Usually people can get in to see them sooner perhaps than with me, and they're less expensive. So that's an option. I do a blog. I answer a question each week. What else? We do a live on the fourth Tuesday of the month where that's fun. People join us. And I say it's kind of like a slumber party with Spirit. and, and we talk to Spirit and answer questions and things like that. So there's a lot going on. And I'm at Ask Julie Ryan on all the socials as well.
Fantastic, Julie.
Well, this does prove your point, Gregg. Julie does not sleep.
Right.
She's having so much fun.
It is fun. It's a lot of fun.
A lot going on, and I just appreciate what you do so much, Julie. And thank you for that generous offer of this wonderful book for people. So we will include that link in the show notes from today, so people can enjoy that great information. So. All right. Well, let's jump back into the rest of our quick PowerPoint here, and we will wrap up for today. So I would love to invite people to upcoming events with me, and you can go to my website, which is wendyrosewilliams.com. Go to the events tab. I have a live channeling with the Ascended Masters and Angels coming up later this month, and also past life exploration. So I know you will enjoy that. That's 2 of the favorite things that clients come for. And Regression Healing 2, which Julie and I discussed, Joe and Marilyn, is now available in audiobook format as well as paperback and Kindle. And I did include the link to Julie and I discussing Joe and Marilyn on the Ask Julie Ryan podcast. Julie, I can't believe you do 4 podcasts a week. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's a
So
lot. It's
just,
fun though. I
just
get to talk to interesting people like you, Wendy girl.
yeah, well, thank you. I so appreciate that. And join us on March 10th for the next Waking Up Spiritually podcast. And go to wakingupspiritually.com. And this conversation will be archived there later today. And you're also able to search it by topic. So if you have questions about guides, past lives, energy practices, whatever it might be, you're very likely to find a podcast there on it. And we included the link to our YouTube channel. And thank you so much for rating and reviewing us on Apple iTunes or whatever your favorite app is. It just helps like-minded people find us. And please visit Gregg at his website and check out what he's got going on, including those wonderful fire circles as well as salt caves. at Gregg, Gregg, Kirk, Kirk.com, or visit me regarding private sessions or events or my books at wendyrosewilliams.com. So thank you again, Julie. Thank you again to all our wonderful listeners, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody. Mwah.